Hi friends, welcome to episode 56. It's Sunday today. I was up here yesterday. The temperature is better than it was the previous weekend. It's 1 degree above freezing, so still quite cold. Plan of action this weekend. Yesterday, while I was up here, I managed to put some paint onto the new ceiling panel. I painted the little beading strips that go in the centre. They've now got the second coat of paint on them. So today, if the big panels have dried, I'm going to put probably another coat on there. Now, talking about deja vu, I've now cleaned up that oil filter thing that was in the sump of the RT. I'm going to take it into work this weekend, and I'm going to give it another clean at work using our stuff we've got there. However, I am going to now take the rocker box cover off the RT. That's my plan for today, because we are a little bit concerned about the sludgy nature of the oil that was in the engine. So all of that engine oil that I put in the other week is going to have to be ditched, and I'm going to have to bring back another load of oil in probably a week or so's time. I'm still waiting for the injectors. The guy's working on them. He's managed to get the nozzles for me. So hopefully within the next week or so, I'll get a phone call to go and collect them. And then all going well, we have to get the oil in the engine, the oil strainer in first, obviously. It'll just come straight out the bottom. I'm sure you worked that one out. Put the injectors in and then give it a test fire. So hopefully that may well happen in a few episodes in the future. But anyway, so here we are with episode 56. I'm going to start with a coffee.
Right, luckily I did manage to get a few other jobs done. Apologies for the slightly dodgy editing. Apparently when you wave your hands at the camera thinks that it wants you to switch off, so it just cut off at that point. So apologies for that. Yeah, anyway, it is going to be a weekend of deja vu. Deja vu item number one is going to be those ceiling panels. Right, so you might recall back in the summer I acquired some wood for the ceiling for this RT. I set about painting it and it all looked fairly happy and dandy, but there was a few little bits that I wasn't happy with, and this is one of them. So what it appeared to be is the laminate was delaminating, and every time that I popped a bit of paint on it, all the fibres would simply just raise up and fall off. So it really wasn't good quality wood, and I thought, well, we can persevere and we can try and get it to settle down, and we can use copious amounts of wood filler where these chunks had fallen out, or simply call it a day and scrap these panels completely. As a result of which, I ended up speaking to Darryl, my brother, who is a carpenter, and we concocted a plan to buy some new wood, to get the beading made professionally by a joiner, and to spend a couple of days just before Christmas installing the new ceiling. Right, so having installed the ceiling over Christmas, I've now got the job of taking it all back out again. And the reason for that is that I want to paint all this stuff on the ground, as it were, on the floor or on the bench, whichever way you want to put it. It's not really on the floor, but you know what I mean. So I've now got to de-install all of this. Darryl used little nails, very tiny nails, to hold this beading on, which is why I'm sort of being careful to prise it off. So yeah, so the first thing I had to do was get all this stuff back down again and get it onto the floor. Now what we've done is we've numbered each panel, so we know where they go. We put the direction of travel on each panel. We know what's top and what's bottom. So with any luck, once all these panels are painted, we'll be able to put them back in the right order that they came out. Well, that's the plan anyway. I've managed to get the screws for it. I'll talk about that in a minute. But there we are. So that is me deconstructing the ceiling on the very first weekend of this year. Right, so out comes the pot of paint again. And off we go. Now, it was so cold. It was, as I say, it was just about 1 degree. It was Saturday. Above freezing, which meant that the paint wasn't flowing as well as I'd hoped. I had this problem with it the previous weekend when I did the beading. So what I did was I popped the pot of paint into a bucket full of hot water, and that warms it up a little bit. But the trouble is, by the time you get to apply it, it's cooled down again. But it was really cold in the barn. This panel that I'm doing here, this is the one above the platform, where the roller is at the top, or that big circle at the top. That is the platform light. Then you've got a little hole in there, just a little bit below that, for the pole, and then you've got the other hole is for the little blind winding thing. Now the one that is at the top nearest the camera, that's the one that sits very near to the conductors area at the top there, and then we've got just to the left, it's almost invisible actually, but just to the left there is the first panel of the interior of the saloon, and then just piled beneath it are all the other panels. As I say, they've all been numbered up. This panel that I'm doing now is one that I really do want to get finished first, so because I've still got to do all the beading for this. Daryl's done a pretty good job of all the straight beading inside the bus, but this requires some intricate work, so I'm probably going to put it up into the bus quite early on, try and do the beading, and this is probably going to be a bit of a nightmare, to be quite honest, because I'm not a carpenter, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. I've found some of the more intricate bits that had come off, but unfortunately a lot of that ceiling, especially around the platform area on RTs, has a habit of rotting away. So there we are. Right, so anyway, you get the general principle of that, don't you? Right, so sticking with the theme of the ceiling, you should immediately recognise these. These are the little light panels that are inside the bus that have got the adverts on them, and those little cutouts are for the bulbs. Now, the very front one nearest us, that was a modification, and the idea is it was to stop reflections into the driver's cab. Routmasters have them as well, but the RT had them modified, so they were added to the RT. Yeah, now I painted these probably about 30 years ago and put them upstairs on the RT, and the dampers got to a couple of them, so they definitely need repainting. So rather than just do one or two and end up with a mismatch, because the paint shade might not be exactly the same, or the gloss might not be exactly the same, so I'm going to respray all of these. So Saturday I spent a bit of time rubbing them down, and the good thing is, because it's freezing cold, I know you might think, well, that's complete madness, using wet and dry and all that water and everything, but what you do is obviously you use boiling hot water, and it keeps your hands nice and warm. Right, so this is the beading, because once I painted those big panels that you saw earlier on, I then set about painting this. So that's the first coat on the 2 or 3 on the left hand side, and that's the second coat on the batch on the right hand side. Now I left these overnight to dry, and Sunday morning this was the situation.
I painted these yesterday, but overnight it was probably not much more than above freezing like it is now, so they're still a little bit sticky, and unfortunately because of the cold, the paint's not really flowed out very well. I did actually heat the paint up yesterday. I put it in a bucket of water with boiling hot water, put the pot in, and then it heats the paint up, and the paint flows much easier. But obviously with the cold in here, it's not going to really, well, it's only as warm as it is when it comes out the pot. So anyway, these are probably going to have to be left till next week now, so I'm going to have to put them around the back for drying. So sadly I was hoping that these were going to be dry, but they're not. They're still slightly tacky, so a little bit of work needs to be done there. The other thing I've got at the moment is here I've got all these little screws or the holes for the screws which I drilled last week, and I countersunk them. The chap who supplies all of my wood screws, vintage screws, a chap called Tony, he can't get stainless steel screws for the right size and the right length that I need for this. The problem with that is he can only supply me with steel screws. Now, I was hoping to get stainless, because the good thing about stainless is you can just pop all these into the bus. All this is all nicely painted up. Just stick them in, and the stainless steel screws can be left unpainted, and they will never rust or rot or anything like that. The problem with metal screws, which are the ones that he can get me, is that they will rust if they're not protected, so they've got to be painted. Now, if I make all this really nice, and this looks lovely, and I'll stick this into the bus, I've then unfortunately got to paint upside down to paint all the screws in, and that's going to be a task I really don't want to do, but I'm going to have to do it anyway, unfortunately. But anyway, yeah, so there's the beading. Here's our little selection of beading for the interior of the bus. This is all of them. These shorter ones are the ones that go left to right across the bus, and these longer ones are the ones that go from the front to the back. These three here are, I don't know, not say spare, but they're the bits I'm going to use to make the beading for the platform. I've found most of the old platform beading now. All I've got to do is to basically cut this to length and then do all the work that's necessary. So that's basically the stuff that's going to sit across the platform, and this is the stuff that's going to be inside the bus. Right, let's get on.
One thing I don't like doing is swapping around from one job to another. What you're looking at here is the dumb irons. In fact, this is the offside dumb iron. And what the dumb iron is the front of the chassis which connects the road spring to the chassis and the front axle. So I don't know, not a very nice looking bit of kit actually. Routmasters are well hidden. You don't see these on a Routmaster because they have a different system. They have what's called an A frame and a B frame. So the A frame's at the front and the B frame's at the back. But anyway, the RT has a chassis which runs almost the continuous length of the vehicle. In fact, it finishes just by the platform. So when you step onto the platform, there's a little sort of step up into the saloon. Well, that's the rear riser. So that's the end of the chassis. And this is the front of the chassis. Now, I did paint strip these donkeys back and then painted them green. So this wasn't too much of a job getting the paint off of these. But it was a job I needed to do. And I'm surprised really I didn't do the offside one when I did the cab, because it was an obvious thing to do. So what you're seeing here is me doing this on Sunday morning. I'd actually paint strip this. In fact, I think actually I put paint strip on it probably the previous week. And being as it's cold, the paint stripper really doesn't do a great deal. What you normally do is you pop paint stripper on something, and a couple of hours later it's all bubbled up, and off it comes. But unfortunately, what with the cold, it doesn't want to shift. So I needed to do a couple of things with this really. I needed to use the paint scraper on it and scrape off as much of the paint as I possibly could, and then attack it with the wire brush. Yeah, luckily I've also got power tools as well, so I did use the wire brush on the end of the drill, which gets quite a bit off. You just notice just there you've got the vehicle designation plate, which on this case is 3RT/3. They're little brass plates. There's one either side. The one on the near side has got RT3461, i.e. the fleet number, and this one is the vehicle type, actually the type of RT that it is. We all do this. In London Transport Days, I simply painted over them. But anyway, in preservation, for some reason, we like to shine them up. So I will do that with this one. So I'm going to shine them up, both this one and that one. There's also a couple that were on the body and were stolen long ago. I assume when the bus was in service, they were probably easy for someone to lean over and unscrew them. So just below the cab window, there were two there, sadly long gone. But anyway, so there we are. So that's getting that off. Now, what I hope to do is next weekend, possibly, I got some priming. So I shall get the primer out and I'll blow these in, and then the green will go back on at some point in the future, but I'm in no rush with these. But the silver that you saw, you may have noticed on the chassis, I'll touch that up a little bit just in case it might have got a little bit of paint strip on it. But you can see this masking just above me. The masking's on there just to protect the paintwork. So I'm not doing any sort of spraying at the moment, but that was just to protect it. So there we are. So that's one of the dumb irons. That's the offside one, and the near side one. It's starting to look quite tidy now. Right, welcome to Deja Vu number 2. If doing the ceiling panels a second time wasn't good enough, we're going to do a second oil change. We were not very happy with the condition of the oil that came out of the bus when I did that first drop. There was quite a lot of I don't know if you call it sediment, but there were bits in it that we weren't sort of particularly keen on. Nothing metallic, but it was very lumpy. So a decision was taken, basically to drop the oil separator, which sits just at the bottom of the sump. And if you watched last week's episode, you'll notice that I actually managed to flood yet again the workshop floor with oil from this thing. Surprisingly, a lot of oil was held in there, and it was very gloopy. So this little filter thing has been put back together again now. Right, so this was it when I took it out of the bus, and I had to scrape a lot of that oil off actually. This was it in parts when I'd cleaned it all up, and finally, tra-la, this is it back together again. I know I've said this before, restoring an RT is a bit like peeling an onion. You take off one layer and you find another layer that needs to be dealt with. So having removed this and found similar gloopy material and stuff in there that we weren't really very happy with, it was suggested that I remove the rocker cover and have a look in there to see what that looks like. Right, so removing this turned out to be a little bit of a project that I didn't expect to do, but I suppose you know, people have said have a look in there, so I will. Anyway, nice. Unlike a root master, root masters have got little sort of I say bolts that go around the outside. These got these nice little turny things, like little top hats. I didn't realise at the time that you had to completely remove them apart from that last one. That last one at the far end remains in there in that cover all the time, but these three are you actually completely remove them. And the two at the end, those two at the far end, numbers let's say 3 and 4, were really stubborn to come out. I've speeded some of it up or cut a few bits out, but anyway, yeah, so once I got those little bolts out and then that far end one sitting upright, I then come into a little problem. When I tried to lift it up, I found it was fouling on that heater pipe. Those heater pipes that squiggle round at the top of shot and then go across the top of the head, they were a later modification. Those are the pipes for the upstairs heater, but unfortunately they were sort of in the way, and this one wasn't going to give up easy, so I ended up having to put this pair of mole grips on it. And the reason I'm not using big mole grips is there wasn't a lot of space there, so I had to try these little ones just to get that pipe off. So once I'd eased it off, it sort of was, well, it was a little bit catchy, it caught on things, but it did actually come out. I take my hat off to people who do this all day long, engineers up and down the country working on buses. An RT is actually relatively simple if a complete fool like me can do it. But anyway, yep, I needed to take this rocker cover off and have a look at what laid beneath. Yeah, a little bit disappointed because that was a little bit gooey as well. Here's some pictures coming up. Right, so what you're looking at is 12 valves, 2 little valves for each cylinder, and there's 6 cylinders obviously, 6 times 2 is 12. So that's what you're looking at, and you can see the rockers are sitting just on top of the valves themselves, and there's a little spring which pushes the valve back up again, so when it's up it's closed and when it's down it's open. Anyway, that should be sprayed with oil, and clearly it was doing that before, when the bus was parked up all that time back, because that oil was sprayed on there 35 years ago maybe. I can't remember when I last started it. So there we are. So that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it's really dirty. It's really gungy and horrible. So I got an old rag and some diesel, and I wiped off as much of that gunge as I could. So the plan of action now is to put another some more oil back in the engine again, and then eventually we'll run her up and we'll see how much of that gunge clears out by itself naturally. And then the second thing I'll do is, but you know, before we start to rally it, is do a third oil change. I'll tell you what I thought I'd do. I'll finish this segue with an RM engine. This is an AV590, which is the most common Routemaster engine, or at least up until refurbishment. There's some heater pipes there as well, a bit like on the RT, but they weren't an afterthought, so they were well out of the way. And those two rocker covers are individual. So there's one for the first three cylinders, and there's another one for the final three cylinders. So they're actually much easier to get off than the RT. They're not so damned heavy. I took my one off the RT. I took it into work today. Today's Monday, by the way, and I washed it off. Unfortunately, it had so much oil in it, all splattered back on me, so I got splattered with oil. But yeah, getting its own back on me. RT blood, I suppose. But anyway, that's an RM engine, and I think we can wrap on this for now. But I've got a couple other little jobs that I needed to do before I went home. Right, so what I'm doing here is I'm putting a mixture of engine oil and diesel down into the cylinders through where the injectors would normally go. This was a suggestion by the guy who's doing my injectors, the guy that's refurbishing them over in Watford. And what he said was that if you can, put sort of about half a cup full of diesel and engine oil down into the cylinders before you try and start it up, and start it up without the injectors in place. So this is what I'm doing basically. So I made up this concoction of engine oil. That engine oil, the reason it's black is that is the old engine oil that I've just dropped out in the last shot. So, or say the second time round engine oil, but it is black as anything. So hence the reason why it looks really gloopy. But hopefully that'll be all right. So anyway, there we are. So that's that done. But now, as you can see, I've got that green paintwork to have a look at as well. Right. So I thought I would wrap on this Sunday afternoon. My very last project was to rub down some of this green paint. It's quite, actually, now that the rocker box covers off, that stuff just underneath where the offside cab window is now quite accessible. But I wanted to rub this down because I do plan, if the weather improves, to get another coat of green on this. There was a couple of little bits I wasn't happy with. Although I did think I had a run on there, and I thought, oh, so I started rubbing it down. I found there was imperfection in the that sort of casting. So, and that casting's been a bit of a pain actually, because they're not like the panels on the outside of the bus, which you can make really nice and shiny. They're actually quite rough. They look like a sort of an orange sort of peel, very orange peely. So that was a bit of a horrible job, really. But anyway, yeah, so that wrapped on Sunday. And I didn't think, in all honesty, that I'd got a lot done this weekend. But sitting here on Monday, the day after, actually doing this, think, okay, we've done a few things. We've still got a long way to go on this RT, a long, long, long way. And yeah, bits of it are fun, bits of it are not. Not doing it in the freezing cold isn't a great deal of fun either. I must admit, my feet were freezing cold, my hands were freezing cold, and I was very pleased at about 5:45 in the evening to jump into the car and go home. So also one of my visitors this weekend was Mark Davis. He was over the other side with his Routemaster. It was great to see Mark as usual, and to sit and chat over a coffee and what have you, which really passed the time a bit. So anyway, thanks very much for watching this. Progress, yep, I suppose. Look forward to doing the next one. Hopefully you've enjoyed this one, and YouTube will, as usual, recommend a few of these for you to watch. So